Welcome back to The Fix with me, Karima Brown. And now to help us unpack the weekend headlines in the newspapers, I'm joined in the studio by a communication strategist at TS Headlines, Themba Sepotokele, and of course by the media monitoring Africa's Thandi Smith. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for taking time out to talk to us. A very, very heavy news cycle. Let's start with the Sunday Times. Thandi, it leads with Malema slush fund exposed. Now, of course, this is not the first time we're hearing about this. It's linked to VBS. What do you make of the story? Does that story have the meat on the bones that it ought to have in order to stick?
Well, honestly, I mean, when I saw the headline and when I heard the story, even on Talk Radio this morning, you would think that suddenly there's this, really meaty story coming out. But again, it's just sort of, okay, well, it's just more of the same. And I think, honestly, people are getting quite, it's tedious to keep on hearing about this ongoing, and to make it a sort of splash it on the front page of something like the Sunday Times, like surely we've got some more important issues to be dealing with. Yes, it is, I think it is newsworthy, not to say that we shouldn't be covering it or we shouldn't be talking about this. It is something that, it is of public interest, but whether it deserves a splash on the front page of the Sunday Times, I don't think it's that important.
Themba, do you agree?
I quite agree, to be honest, Karima, because this has been happening for quite a while now. We know it, but it's not giving us anything new. The reporter didn't really honestly go dig deeper and give us some more meat. I would have expected that a Sunday paper that has the whole week should have given us more and then give us bank statements and stuff like that, but they didn't, unfortunately.
In fact, I think the Daily Maverick probably did a better job in terms of actually tracking, Mr. Malema's bank card. And last week, of course, the Mail and Guardian did really well with Mr. Floyd Chivambu, where he actually had to concede that he did get the money, but that the money was clean. Let's move to the City Press now. This is a very interesting story. It talks about the security minister at war with spy chiefs. Now, after state capture, this is, of course, not a surprise. Thandi, how important is the story? And more importantly, is it written in such a way that one can actually see the politicization of the security intelligence services and how dangerous that is for South Africa? Well,
again, I think that what we're seeing is quite a massive story that's getting a very basic context given to the public. I think that the link between xenophobic violence and, the information and all the evidence and what you see coming out in the story, I mean, that is critical. We sort of had this massive flare-up. We had all this, violence across the country, and it sort of then just went quiet.
Yes.
And you left with the public feeling very vulnerable, very, sort of what's going on. And then suddenly you get this very politicized story, but you're not really able to connect the dots as an ordinary citizen reading the front page of a Sunday paper. So I think that...
What are the elements for you that is missing? What's the context here that's missing?
Well, I think your ordinary perspective. Again, we've got this web of links between ministers and our spy chiefs, and you get this very filtered overview of what's going on. But to make that link between what goes on in government and in terms of ministerial accountability to what actually happens on the ground, and I think that link is missing.
Themba, I had the same feeling when I read the story. I thought there were actually two stories in the story. The one was the fact that there was a failure of intelligence on the part of intelligence services with regard to giving the government early warning around the xenophobic attacks. And then there's this other factional battle that's going on. Should the two stories have been split? Because during the xenophobic violence, the Minister for Defence, Nosiviwe Mapisa-Nqakula, constantly said that there was a failure of intelligence, but she put it at the doorstep of police crime intelligence because they categorized it as a crime. And of course, here here we see that because it's foreign nationals, this is state security actually being involved. Is this two stories that are conflated into one?
No, true. I think Rapule has just touched the tip of the iceberg in these two stories. Actually, he should have separated them, and I believe that he should do more digging and do investigations on this, because one, two, it doesn't bode well for the minister to add odds with the spy chiefs. It doesn't say at all. And then, you know, when I was going through it, I said I feel really pity for President Ramaphosa, because if you go to the second page, there's a story that Shamela Pato also might also consider not charging the guys who are involved in Sazerog unit. So those kind of stuff that I think City Press should have done more because they also had a week in introducing such stories. So Rapule, one, should have separated the stories. One should have been a sidebar, one should have been big. But here's another thing in that kind of a story, is that it is they say it's a failure of intelligence gathering. So it says a lot. If people cannot, you know, get those early sign warnings, then it becomes a problem. Because intelligence, we have what we call CDWs on the ground, who are supposed also to be working to say this area is kind of a hotspot, and then where intelligence should come in with SAPS. It shouldn't mean that now we just see this slap of just violence just like that. They should be doing more than that.
Now, of course, on the Sunday Sun, which is a tabloid newspaper, we have got a story about our finance minister on page 2. It says, Minister take a legal action. Now, I don't like this kind of stories. I think that the private lives of public officials are private, and we should respect that unless it is in contradiction for what they stand for publicly, or unless they've broken the law or they've hurt someone. Is this a story, Thandi?
I really don't think so.
And why do you think it's in this newspaper?
Well, you know, there's reason one. You know, we're dealing with a tabloid. I think that there are different angles that get taken on stories. And we do see this kind of content quite often in tabloid print. And I think, you know, because we are dealing with a minister, because we're dealing with, you know, a high-profile someone in public office, you are going to want to dig around in private affairs. So is it interesting to the public? Probably yes, but is it, you know, in the public's interest? No.
Now, a lot of people, Themba, says that the private is in fact political. We know that this minister's deputy was in the same newspaper for also his private life, but we had a gendered perspective on that story, because the woman in that story alleges that she was forced to terminate a pregnancy. And of course, women are autonomous beings. They are supposed to be in charge of their own reproductive rights and health. So one could argue that that was in the public interest. How fine is that line about what the public would like to know and what is genuinely in the public interest?
The truth is, if you are a public figure, remember that you have your rights. Unfortunately, there will be a particular time where your rights become public interest. So had the story gone deeper, because it broke on Friday, had the story gone deeper to give us the name of the lady and what are the details, especially because it said nothing about the detail. If the minister used money or the least trying to extort money, for what reasons we don't know. It can be story of
public money,
exactly.
And none of that is present.
It can't just be story about extortion and it ends there. It doesn't give us any meat. So the story is quite short in detail. I think, you know, to be honest, colleagues, when during this week where we are celebrating Press Freedom Day, we should do more digging. We should do more digging. We shouldn't just run with the one-sided story. He said, she said.
Thank you so very much. On that note, I think it's a great way to end, of course, the fix. Now that you've had your fix for the week, take care. See you again next week. Thank you for watching.